The air inside the ceremony space felt suspended in a delicate balance between anticipation and reverence, as though even the walls understood that a promise was about to be made. Hope stood at the front, her hands trembling just slightly as she prepared herself for the vows she had rehearsed in quiet moments of reflection and doubt. The dress fell softly around her, white not as a symbol of perfection but of intention, of the deliberate choice to begin again despite all that had come before. Around her, faces glowed with expectation, friends and family leaning forward as if they too needed reassurance that love, once broken, could truly be restored. Hope drew in a breath, grounding herself in the present. Every step that had brought her here replayed in her mind: the heartbreak, the rebuilding, the countless moments when she had questioned whether trusting again was an act of courage or foolishness. She had chosen courage. She had chosen Liam. And now, standing at the threshold of her vows, she believed, if only for this moment, that the past had loosened its grip. The stillness shattered with the vibration of a phone cutting through the hush. At first, it seemed insignificant, an intrusion easily dismissed, but then the expression on the face of the person who answered changed with alarming speed. Color drained away, replaced by a look of raw panic that rippled outward like a shockwave. Words were spoken quietly, urgently, but their meaning traveled faster than sound. Liam had been in a serious accident on the way to the restaurant. The details were unclear, only that it was bad enough to warrant immediate attention. Hope felt the world tilt. The vows slipped from her mind, replaced by a single, overwhelming fear that eclipsed everything else. The room erupted into chaos as guests surged to their feet, conversations colliding in frantic confusion. Chairs scraped back, hands reached for coats, and the ceremony dissolved into urgent movement. Brooke's face reflected pure terror as she rushed to Hope's side, while Deacon tried to extract clarity from fragments of information that refused to settle into certainty. Hope barely registered the noise. Her heart hammered painfully as she struggled to process the words, to understand how joy could transform so violently into dread. Just moments ago, she had been preparing to promise forever. Now, she was confronted with the possibility that forever might be slipping away before it had even begun. The cruel irony felt almost unbearable, as if happiness itself had provoked some unseen force into retaliation. As the room emptied in frantic waves, another presence slipped in unnoticed, moving against the current rather than with it. Sheila Carter, uninvited and unwelcome, recognized opportunity in chaos the way others recognized danger. She had lingered nearby, drawn by the ceremony she had been excluded from, her resentment simmering beneath a carefully maintained calm. The news of Liam's accident cracked something open inside her, not concern, but vindication. Disorder was her element, and she stepped into it with unsettling ease. Sheila's voice rose above the confusion, sharp and accusatory, slicing through the panic with deliberate intent. She blamed Hope openly, claiming that Liam's absence, his accident, was somehow the consequence of Hope's choices. The accusation was absurd, yet perfectly designed to wound. In moments of fear, logic faltered, and Sheila knew exactly how to exploit that vulnerability. She painted Hope as the catalyst, the center of every tragedy, feeding on the stunned silence that followed her words. Hope turned toward the sound, disbelief battling fury. Even in the midst of terror for Liam, she felt the sting of Sheila's intrusion, the familiar violation of having her pain repurposed as spectacle. Brooke reacted instantly, stepping between them, her voice firm with maternal fury as she demanded Sheila leave. Deacon's anger flared, his instinct to protect igniting as he recognized the manipulation for what it was, a calculated attempt to deepen chaos under the guise of truth. Yet Sheila was not finished. She thrived on disruption on moments when emotional defenses were already compromised. She spoke of fate and consequence, of patterns repeating themselves, her words designed not to convince, but to destabilize. Every sentence was an invitation to doubt, a reminder that happiness was fragile and easily stolen. Even as people pushed her toward the exit, her presence lingered like a stain, impossible to ignore. Outside the ceremony space, sirens wailed in the distance, drawing everyone's focus back to the immediate crisis. Hope's thoughts narrowed to Liam alone, injured and vulnerable somewhere between life and death. She clung to the belief that he would survive, that this was another test they would endure together. Yet beneath that hope, a darker realization began to surface, one that would soon reframe the night entirely. As details emerged at the hospital, the narrative shifted from tragic accident to deliberate act. Witnesses described a vehicle behaving erratically, forcing Liam's car into a dangerous situation. Evidence suggested intent, not chance. The collision had not been random. Someone had wanted to stop Liam from reaching the wedding, had calculated the timing with chilling precision. The revelation sent a new wave of shock through those gathered, transforming fear into something far more sinister. Hope felt a surge of cold clarity. The interruptions, the accusations, the chaos, it was all connected. What had seemed like cruel coincidence now revealed itself as orchestration. Someone had targeted their happiness, weaponizing both physical danger and emotional devastation. The thought that Liam's life had been endangered deliberately ignited a fierce resolve within her, cutting through the haze of fear. This was no longer just about survival, it was about accountability. As authorities began piecing together the events, the ceremony space stood abandoned, a silent witness to the night's unraveling. The flowers remained untouched, the altar empty, the vows unspoken. What should have been a moment of union had become a fracture point, exposing the vulnerability of love in a world where malice often wore the mask of chance. Sheila's accusations echoed faintly in Hope's mind, stripped now of their power by the emerging truth. Hope understood that blame was the easiest weapon to wield, especially against someone who had dared to hope publicly. Yet she also understood that resilience was forged in moments like this, when fear threatened to consume, but purpose demanded resistance. As Hope rushed toward the hospital, her dress trailing behind her like a ghost of the celebration that never was, she carried with her a renewed determination. Whatever force had tried to tear them apart had failed in its ultimate goal. Love had been interrupted, not destroyed. And as the truth behind Liam's accident continued to surface, one thing became painfully clear. This was only the beginning of a far greater reckoning, one that would demand courage, clarity, and an unyielding refusal to let chaos define their future. The hospital corridor was a narrow tunnel of fluorescent light and hushed urgency, a place where time stretched and contracted unpredictably, governed not by clocks but by fear. Hope stood frozen just outside the operating room doors, her wedding dress now wrinkled and stained, the fabric a cruel reminder of the joy that had existed only hours earlier. The soft white that had once symbolized promise now felt almost mocking, as if it belonged to another version of her life entirely. Somewhere beyond those doors, Liam lay unconscious, his body broken by an impact that had been neither random nor merciful, his survival hinging on the precision of surgeons racing against time. The words, emergency surgery, echoed relentlessly in Hope's mind. They carried a finality that terrified her, stripping away every illusion of control. She replayed the last moments she had seen Liam, the warmth in his eyes, the certainty in his voice when he had promised they would face everything together. Now she could not even hold his hand. All she could do was stand still, suspended between hope and dread, praying that the man she loved would make it through the night. Doctors moved with swift efficiency, their expressions carefully neutral, offering only fragments of information. Liam had sustained severe internal injuries. The trauma was extensive. The surgery would be long and complicated. No promises could be made. Each sentence landed like a blow, forcing Hope to confront a reality where love alone could not guarantee safety. Brooke hovered close, her own fear sharpened by maternal helplessness, while Deacon paced the floor, his anger manifesting as restless motion rather than words. As the hours crawled by, the gravity of what had happened began to settle over everyone present. This was not simply an accident that could be dismissed as tragic misfortune. Early findings from the police investigation painted a far more disturbing picture. Witnesses had described a vehicle deliberately swerving into Liam's path, forcing his car into a violent collision. Skid marks told a story of intention rather than panic. Traffic cameras revealed calculated timing, a maneuver designed to cause maximum damage without immediate identification. The conclusion was inescapable. Liam had been targeted. The realization sent a wave of cold shock through Hope's already fragile composure. Someone had wanted Liam hurt, or worse. Someone had decided that stopping him from reaching the wedding was worth risking his life. The cruelty of that decision ignited a new kind of fear, one that went beyond grief into the realm of violation. Their happiness had not merely been interrupted, it had been attacked. It was in this charged atmosphere that Thomas Forrester re-entered the story, his arrival both unexpected and unsettling. He had returned to Los Angeles from a business trip earlier than planned, his mind already occupied with unresolved tension at Forrester Creations and the lingering weight of his complicated history with Hope. Fate, however, placed him on the same stretch of road as Liam that night, seconds before disaster unfolded. Thomas had witnessed the crash from a distance close enough to recognize that something was wrong before metal met metal. He remembered the way the other car had accelerated instead of braking, the unnatural angle of the maneuver, the absence of hesitation. Instinct had taken over, compelling him to stop, to call for help, to stay until emergency services arrived. At the time, he had not known who was in the car. It was only later, when he learned Liam was the victim, that the full weight of what he'd seen crashed down on him. At the police station, Thomas recounted every detail with unsettling clarity. He described the vehicle, the timing, the deliberate nature of the impact. His testimony aligned with the preliminary evidence, strengthening the case for intentional harm. He provided information about a partial license plate, a detail overlooked in the chaos, but crucial in narrowing down suspects. For investigators, his appearance was a breakthrough. For everyone else, it was complicated. Hope learned of Thomas's involvement while waiting for news from the operating room. The irony was not lost on her. The man whose past actions had once pushed her to the brink of psychological collapse was now emerging as a potential key to justice. Her emotions collided painfully, gratitude tangled with suspicion, relief with unease. She wanted to believe that Thomas's presence was purely coincidental, that his assistance was motivated by genuine concern rather than self-interest. Yet experience had taught her that nothing involving Thomas was ever entirely simple. Liam's condition remained critical as the investigation gained momentum. The surgery stretched on, each passing hour amplifying the tension. Hope sat unmoving, her fingers clenched together so tightly they ached, as though pain might anchor her to the present. She tried not to imagine life without Liam, tried not to envision a future rewritten by violence. Instead, she focused on fragments of memory, shared laughter, quiet reassurances, the resilience that had carried them through so much already. Outside the operating room, conversations turned increasingly tense. The fact that Thomas had been present at the scene raised questions as quickly as it provided answers. Some wondered whether his return at that exact moment was coincidence or something more calculated. His history of obsession, manipulation, and blurred boundaries made it impossible for everyone to accept his role at face value. Even those grateful for his testimony could not entirely dismiss the unease his involvement provoked. Thomas felt that unease acutely. He was aware that suspicion followed him like a shadow, no matter how carefully he chose his actions. He told himself that his only motivation was to protect Hope and help bring the perpetrator to justice. Yet, he could not ignore the internal conflict stirring within him. Part of him recognized that being the one to provide critical evidence placed him in a position of influence, a chance to redefine how others saw him. He questioned his own intentions, wondering whether redemption could ever be fully disentangled from desire. As detectives pursued leads based on Thomas's information, the possibility of a larger conspiracy emerged. The attack on Liam did not appear impulsive. It had been planned, timed to coincide with the wedding, designed to inflict maximum emotional damage alongside physical harm. Whoever orchestrated it understood the significance of that night, understood that hurting Liam would devastate Hope in a way few other actions could. Hope's fear slowly transformed into resolve. Sitting beside Brooke and Deacon, she realized that survival would demand more than waiting and wishing. She would have to confront the truth behind the violence, no matter how painful or destabilizing it proved to be. The past she had worked so hard to leave behind was reaching forward, insisting on acknowledgement. And Thomas, whether she trusted him or not, was now inextricably linked to uncovering that truth. When the surgeon finally emerged, exhaustion etched into every line of his face, the hallway fell silent once more. The surgery had been long and complicated, but Liam was alive. The relief that flooded through Hope was overwhelming, collapsing her strength in a rush of tears she had been holding back for hours. He was not out of danger yet, but he had survived the first, most critical battle. That alone felt like a miracle. As Liam was transferred to intensive care, the reality of what lay ahead became clear. Recovery would be slow. Answers would be hard-won. The attack had set into motion a chain of events that would not simply fade away with physical healing. Trust, loyalty, and intention would all be tested in the days to come. Thomas stood apart as Hope was allowed to see Liam briefly, watching the scene with an expression that revealed more conflict than triumph. He had helped bring hope where there had been despair, yet he knew that his role in this story was far from resolved. The evidence he provided could lead to justice, or expose truths that would once again place him at the center of suspicion. As night deepened around the hospital, one truth became undeniable. Liam's injury was not an isolated act of violence, but the opening move in a dangerous game. And as Hope sat beside the man she loved, holding on to the fragile certainty of his survival, she understood that the path forward would require confronting not only an external enemy, but the complicated web of past actions, hidden motives, and uneasy alliances that now surrounded them all.